Howdy and welcome back. I'm Steven and this is FWP Reviews. For the last 15 years, the ever-iconic role of James Bond has been owned and nearly perfected by Daniel Craig. Seeing Daniel Craig's reign as Bond comes to an end was something that I was dreading, but I knew that it was coming and I was extremely excited to see how it played out in this newest installment, No Time to Die. My excitement was immeasurable, and now that No Time to Die has released, I've got a lot of thoughts, so let's get into my review of No Time to Die. No Time to Die picks up after the events of Spectre as Bond has seemingly chose a peaceful retirement with Madeline. Following some very important and abrupt changes, we see Bond bumming it around in Jamaica. When the game calls him back in, it could be his most dangerous mission yet. With that in mind, let's hear my thoughts. Now to get into my review, this is a forewarning. I've got some extensive thoughts, and this review is going to include spoilers because I kind of want to dive into a lot of my thoughts that are more extensive and deeper into the movie. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I highly recommend going to check it out on the biggest screen you can and seeing this brilliant finale for yourself. No Time to Die is an excellent and brilliant finale for what has become this sprawling sort of chapter of the Bond saga between Daniel Craig starting and where we are now. This movie manages to wrap up what we have been watching unfold for this version of Bond over these past few years, while also adding new things to make this movie fresh and fun despite it being sort of the end of what is currently going on. One element I've really enjoyed, and it seems like a lot of other people really enjoyed, was the humor. This movie has a lot of great jokes, and almost all of them land extremely well. There's a hefty amount of humor, and it allows the viewer to laugh at the movie, but it never undermines the weight of what's going on. There's a lot of humor instilled in the dramatic irony and the sort of absurdity of this story, and this movie manages to make that something special as well. Tonally, this movie sort of blends all of its tones really well together, including the humor I mentioned just previously, and also the surprising depth of emotion we see. There were definitely some extremely hard-hitting moments in Casino Royale and Skyfall, the two better of the series, but there hasn't been this sort of emotion that runs sort of at the core of the thematics and what's happening in the movie, as we saw in No Time to Die. The emotions run high throughout this movie, and the end brews and builds into this brilliant climax. This emphasis on emotion in this movie allowed Daniel Craig to sort of step into this role and add a lot of depth that I didn't think that he would be allowed to add. They really leaned into and sort of touched on the events with Vesper and Casino Royale, which I really appreciated, and they sort of explored the implications of him and his relation with Madeline. And then you throw this kid in there and man, you're fucking me up. After the time jump, we get to see Bond sort of distraught and kind of lost without Madeline because he really thought that maybe, just maybe, it would work out. Seeing how their dynamic sort of unfolds from when they meet again until the end is something brilliant, and it's so important to this movie working. This ultimately winds down to that brutal finale that just gutted me emotionally. This full closure for Daniel Craig's Bond as we see Bond's death is something that I thought could happen, but I wasn't sure would. When he ultimately does die in that fiery explosion, it makes this sort of build-up we're seeing of the will he, won't he make it out of this alive sort of hit in an emotional way that I haven't felt in a movie in a long time because movies rarely go there. The brilliant emotional finale that it is feels genuine and not for shocks because it allows it to play into this sort of traditional idea we have of the hero will make it out at the last second type of deal. It feels like a natural end, and it makes so much sense within the story that Bond has always sort of been trying to get out of the game, but the game always calls him back, and his sort of sense of duty has never let him fully get out of the game, and seeing how the game finally is the one that takes him away instead of him taking himself away from the game is a painfully poetic sort of thing. There's so much good to say about this satisfying, incredibly emotionally fulfilling but gutting finale that it just speaks volumes about how good this movie is. A lot of the more technical aspects of this movie, as one would hope, are excellent. Two of these include the pacing and the action. The pacing and the action work well together to create something that is extremely riveting despite it running for almost 2 hours and 43 minutes. There are definitely lulls in the pace, and there are things that could have been cut out, but none of it feels to overly stand out like, I really wish they hadn't put this in the movie. It's all, at the very least, entertaining. The most impressive thing about it is how, despite the lulls in the pace potentially and just the overly long runtime, this movie invests the viewer in it, and it continually does so throughout the movie. The action is tight, well done, and extremely coordinated, and it's never sloppy and sort of over the top. It is the traditional Bond action we've come to know and love. It was always fascinating to me to see just how things were going to unfold in particular sequences, as this movie had this really interesting flow to the action. I don't think it tops the action that we get to see in Skyfall, but it was so riveting to see such a well done variety of action in today's age, and it's hard to fault any lulls in the pace because of that. Other technical aspects of this movie that stood out to me were the performances and the cinematography. One of the most important things about Bond is its unique locations, and a lot of movies have had difficulties portraying those unique and exotic locations as well as the more domestic locations and portraying them in a way that is beautiful and letting the scenery sort of speak volumes for what's going on. This movie never suffers with that. Almost every location they're at is extremely unique and interesting. Even this weird supervillain base was so well thought out and well coordinated for the action and for the scenes that it just led to this really beautiful film on the eyes. The strong performances of this movie mostly come down to Daniel Craig and Léa Seydoux. I have already touched on the excellent emotional range that Daniel Craig was allowed to show and was able to show. It continually blew me away how unexpected but so pleasant it was. Daniel Craig and Léa Seydoux are so perfect together for this kind of movie that their charisma and their natural chemistry works really well for the story that's unfolding in the movie. Additionally, Léa Seydoux is a generational talent, so naturally, she brings a lot to the screen. Newcomers Ana de Armas and Lashana Lynch were excellent additions to this movie. This movie manages to take steps in improving upon the Bond girl trope in an unexpected way, but a really welcome way. Ana de Armas brings so much humor and fun to the screen, even though she's only on screen for a few minutes. There are people clamoring for a spin-off involving her, and I mean, I'd watch it. Lashana Lynch's character manages to add a new fold to this 5-year time jump, and we get to see some interesting interactions that help actually build up the movie instead of just being there because they feel like they need to do something special. It actually feels like a genuine way for us to sort of dive into what exactly this means for this character. A couple of smaller things I really loved about this movie were the cars and the gadgets. We haven't seen a lot of these gadgets since Casino Royale, and it was great to see a lot of the more goofier but still somewhat grounded gadgets for this world to sort of up the ante, and this again was adding to the freshness of this movie. You know, we've seen so many of these Daniel Craig movies, they've added something new that doesn't detract from what story we're seeing and make the story absurd. It just makes the movie kind of more fun. In terms of the cars, it was great to see the DB5 return. That car is absolutely beautiful, and I really enjoyed seeing the Vantage V8. I'm kind of upset that the Valhalla stayed in the garage, but I'll allow it because we got the Vantage. I was impressed a lot more by the music than I expected I would be because the Bond music is always good, but obviously it leans on its traditional theme quite a bit. However, there were some things that I thought Hans Zimmer brought to the table that really kind of helped this movie, of course. One of the big ones was the loud, brassy, sort of new theme that I hadn't really heard before that was brought in, and I really enjoyed the heavy hits of that song when it was included in the movie. Additionally, Billie Eilish obviously kills it with her song, and I was surprised how well it worked with this movie because at first I was a little hesitant because obviously the song was good, but I was like, this feels like it might not tonally go with this movie, but it does, and it does so extremely well. And then Hans Zimmer is able to work in the cues from Billie Eilish's song, the background piano, into the big building climax of the finale of the movie, and it sort of makes the movie this sort of circular musical story, and it really hits emotionally very hard. With that, let's wrap this review up. No Time to Die is everything I wanted and more for this Daniel Craig Bond saga finale. It managed to wrap things up in a surprisingly funny and emotional way. It manages to wrap this story up in a way that feels true to the 15 years that we've been experiencing this character. I'm so thankful for the cast and the crew of these movies that have, over this 15 years, built such an intense and sprawling story in this grittier reboot that we saw of Bond in 2006. All of the hard work for the cast and the crew and all of the fans enjoying the movies has allowed this to become something for the books and something that will be really hard to top in the future. Until next time, follow my Instagram at FWPReviews100 for daily written reviews about the newest movies. With that, this is FWP Reviews signing off. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.